You know, when we think of the Buddha, we often picture this serene, almost timeless figure. But here's the thing, to really get his ideas, we have to travel back in time, about 2,500 years, to understand the very specific, very turbulent world that made him. So, if we really want to grasp what Buddhism is all about, we have to start with a more fundamental question. Why then? Why there? What on earth was going on in the world that made a radical new way of thinking like this not just possible, but necessary? All right, let's dive in. Our story starts in the Ganges Valley, around the 6th century BC. And let me tell you, this was not some peaceful, quiet time for meditation. It was an age of intense and often really violent change. This whole period was just defined by massive upheaval. I mean, everything was being turned on its head. How people were governed, how they earned a living, the very fabric of society. And this wasn't some slow, gentle evolution. It was a full-blown revolution. And at the absolute heart of all this turmoil was this huge political struggle. You can honestly think of it as an ancient Game of Thrones, a clash between two totally different ways of holding power. So on one side, you had these groups called the Ghana Sanghas. The best way to think of them is as these clan-based republics. Power wasn't in the hands of a single king. Instead, it was shared among the big, elite families of the ruling clan. And this slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? You have the monarchies, centralized, absolute rule, controlling the super fertile river valley. Then you have the Ghana Sanghas, decentralized, collective power, holding on in the Himalayan foothills. We're talking about two completely different worlds, literally right next to each other. Now, these new monarchies, they were playing for keeps. Rulers like Ajatasattu of Magadha were absolutely ruthless. They used whatever it took, strategic warfare, political marriages, even assassination, all backed by efficient new bureaucracies to grow their power. The goal was simple: consolidate and conquer, no matter the cost. But all this political drama wasn't just happening on its own. It was being fueled by a massive economic revolution, one that was kicked into gear by a new technology that changed absolutely everything. And believe it or not, it pretty much all came down to one single material: iron. The widespread use of iron tools was the spark that lit the fire of this incredible explosion in wealth and productivity. And you can see the domino effect right here. Iron tools mean better plows. Better plows mean, for the first time ever, huge surpluses of rice. All that extra food could support way more people, which led to a population boom. And that boom led to the rise of huge cities, what historians call India's second urbanization. And with all that came the things you'd expect in a more complex economy. Suddenly, you see coins being used everywhere. New trade routes start crisscrossing the land. All sorts of specialized crafts pop up. And of course, these massive new cities, the Mahanagaras, become these buzzing centers of money and power. But here's the flip side. All this progress, it came at a huge human cost. This new wealth was not being shared. Instead, it was carving deep, painful divides into society. I mean, the ancient texts themselves talk about these two new extremes in society. On one hand, you have the Mahad Bogakula, the families with just immense wealth. And on the other, the Dalita Kula, the desperately poor, needy families. A massive gap was opening up between the haves and the have-nots. And some of the descriptions of this poverty are just gut-wrenching. The texts talk about people who were, and I'm quoting here, needy, without enough to eat or drink, without even a covering for the back. This wasn't just an economic trend, it was a painful daily reality for so many. There's actually this one story from the time that just perfectly captures this new tension. It's about a servant girl named Kali. Now, her mistress had this citywide reputation for being incredibly kind and gentle. But Kali, she wasn't so sure. She started to wonder, is this kindness real, or is it just an act, a luxury that she can afford because I do everything perfectly? So she decides to find out. She's going to test her. So for 3 days in a row, she deliberately wakes up late. And on that third day, bam, the mask comes off. The mistress's calm facade just shatters. She explodes into a violent rage and brutally attacks her servant girl, showing the cruelty that was hiding just under the surface. It's a really powerful little story, right? It shows you that this shiny new social order was actually built on a foundation of exploitation and violence that was just simmering below. It was not a stable or a happy society. Okay, So you've got this world. It's politically violent, it's economically disruptive, it's full of social suffering. This is the world that Buddhism walks into. And it offers a radically humane answer for a brand new, very troubled age. And this chart does a fantastic job of showing just how different Buddhism's answer was. The old system said your status in life is decided by who you were born as. Buddhism comes along and says, nope, it's determined by your actions, your karma. The old system celebrated wealth. Buddhism warned that it was a trap, a source of attachment. And it basically swapped out these complex, expensive rituals for a personal, internal path of meditation and morality.
You know, the historian Uma Chakravarti really sums it up perfectly. She says that Buddhism offered a new blueprint, a way to conceptualize in a more humane way the direction in which a changing society could reorder social and political relations.
So, what's the big takeaway here? It's that Buddhism wasn't some abstract philosophy born in a quiet monastery. It was a direct, profound, and deeply practical response to the very real suffering and problems of its time. To get the philosophy, you first have to get the world it was trying to heal.
And by the way, this whole perspective we've been exploring, it comes from the incredible foundational work of historian Uma Chakravarti. Her research is what gives us this amazing window into that world. And that kind of leaves us with a big question for our own lives, doesn't it? If every great idea is really a response to the challenges of its own time, what are the big problems our world is facing right now? And what new ideas are starting to rise up to meet them?